voting in favour of the named nominee. So votes for Councillor Dupre, please raise your hands. And votes for Councillor Sharp. Okay, so with 7 votes for Councillor Dupre, Councillor Dupre is duly elected the chair for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the next municipal year. Congratulations, Councillor Dupre. Would you please come and take your seat at the top table?
Thank you very much indeed, members, whichever way you voted in that election. I'm very grateful for the contributions that I know that you're going to make to the work of this committee this year, and I look forward to another year as your chair. So we move now to the election of vice chair, which is the next item on the agenda, and I'm looking for nominations. Councillor van der Weyer.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Sharp if he's willing to stand.
Thank you. That's a nomination for Councillor Sharp. Are there any other nominations for Vice Chair? Not seeing any, and therefore I believe Councillor Sharp to be nominated as Vice Chair and to occupy that position. So congratulations, Councillor Sharp. So to move on then to item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 28th of March 2022. And I'll take the accuracy of the minutes first. Are people content with the accuracy of the minutes? I'm seeing no dissent, so thank you very much for that. There is, following that, a table of actions, which I will turn to in a moment, the action log. And I'm wondering whether officers could briefly steer us through that, particularly with regard to the items which are status open or response in progress, and give us some idea of timelines on those and next steps.
Thank you, Chair. So we have 2 actions outstanding from the last meeting in regards to the climate change plans. I believe the officer has been contacted, and that has been, I think, committee will be provided with further information, hopefully at the next meeting. The work programme item, so we have, there was an item for the Energy Hub to be invited to the meeting, this meeting. After discussions with officers, their preference would be for a briefing session to be held with members before the next meeting, so that sensitive information might also be shared at that session before it being brought into the public meeting.
Are members comfortable with that as a way forward on that item? It was something that concerned us a lot at the last meeting. Thank you.
And so the climate action plan, we have that for our September. We have housing here today, and the skills item, I believe, is scheduled for July.
It's certainly on the schedule. Let's have a look. Councillor Coles, yes, of course.
Thank you. I'm just thinking that last element, which relates to a fair amount of work. It may be that now is not the time to do it, and we may want to postpone it a short while.
Do members agree? Yeah, okay, I'll take your advice on that as a previous lead member.
In regards to other open actions, from the meeting on January, we are still waiting for a response on the Sustainable Growth Ambition Statement. We can chase officers for that. And I think there is also a outstanding one for clarity on whether there would be a second consultation on the MTFP. So we will chase officers for a response on that one as well.
Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, I'll bring it in here because and it's something. When we looked at the budget last year, we considered we got presented very much the initial run look in November. We then had a much more detailed look in December, which there were lots of gaps and questions about. And then we came back in January to look at it again, by which I think it was Rochelle said to us, well, actually, we know we were out of time with the consultation. So I'm thinking, and looking at John, to be honest, for this coming year, I think we need to be either looking at it earlier, or else we need to still be able to comment in January, because I know a lot of us came to the January committee from all sides with questions and comments, but were slightly taken aback that we couldn't properly comment on the budget. So I'll bring it in there. It's probably the easiest place to bring it in.
Thank you very much. It's clear to me that we need to be in a position to have conversations within time on the budget. That's an absolutely vital part of our roles. So I suggest that we have discussions with the relevant officers to ensure that the timing is appropriate for us to be able to have something to comment on and comment while it is still open to us to do so and make a difference.
The other open actions, I believe, as officers, we need to chase up the other officers to get responses sent through to committee members as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. And I realise that a lot of people at member and officer level have a lot else on their minds at the moment in this authority, but we are, I think, also required to see business as usual continue. So I hope that we can close off as many as possible of those actions as soon as possible and be clear on timelines for finishing those off. Councillor Hay, is that a request to speak?
Thank you. I'm just inquiring about, from the meeting of the 25th of October, about the bus review. It says a report will be drafted and issued in due course. Have we got any idea how far away from that happening?
Is there anyone who can offer us any information on that? If not, I suggest we take that away and come back to you with a written answer as soon as possible between meetings, I think, because you're absolutely right, that's important. Other than that, are we happy with the action log? So in that case, we then move on to the next item, which is public questions. I don't believe we have any.
No public questions received.
Thank you. So item 6 is appointment of lead members on page 12. So Anne, are you going to talk us through that?
So the report before you is the appointment of lead members. The committee are recommended to nominate and appoint roles of lead members for the Housing, Skills, Transport and Infrastructure Committee and the Business Board, to also nominate and appoint a member to the lead member role for Climate Change and Environment, and to discuss and agree any rapporteur roles, including the continuation of the One Cam rapporteur role and the bus reform rapporteur roles. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Anne on this item? Right, okay, I don't see any, so we are required to nominate and appoint members as lead members for overviewing the various executive committees in the Business Board, a lead member for Climate Change and Environment, and rapporteur roles. So taking those in turn, the lead member roles, last year the housing role was Councillor van der Weyer. Councillor van der Weyer, are you interested in continuing with
Yes,
that
I'd be
role?
very, very happy to.
Is there any other interest in that lead role? Not seeing any, so are we happy to appoint Councillor van der Weyer to that role? Thank you. The next one is skills, and we had 2 members covering that area, Councillor Coles and Councillor Miscandlin. Can I ask whether you are both still interested in continuing that role?
Very happy to continue, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anybody else interested in that role, or are we happy to see Councillors Coles and Miscandlin continue I'm seeing no other hands, so congratulations, gentlemen, and thank you. Then the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, the member was Councillor Bagent. Councillor Bagent, would you like to put your name forward for that role again?
I'm happy to continue, but if there's anybody else who wants to do it, I won't feel like I've been pushed to one side.
Right, okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that with a burning desire to take on the role fulfilled for the last year by Councillor Bagent? I'm very sorry, Councillor Bagent, it's you again. And the business board, I think, was Councillor Dew last year, if I remember correctly. So, Councillor Dew, are you interested in? Is there any other interest in shadowing the business board? Once again, my condolences, Councillor Dew. Thank you. So then the next item B is nominating and appointing a member as lead member for climate change and environment. That role has been fulfilled by Councillor Atkins. Councillor Atkins, are you wishing to continue in that role?
Very happy to continue in that role, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to challenge Councillor Atkins for that role? I'm not seeing anybody, so congratulations, Councillor Atkins. And C is to discuss and agree any rapporteur roles, including the continuation of the One Cam and bus reform rapporteur roles. One Cam last year was Councillor Davey, who is no longer with us, I think, and Councillor Sharp, you're indicating.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the One Cam. Obviously, it's no more, for want of a better word. I think I am the last remaining member of the CAM working group, which was Kevin Price, and then Jocelyn Scott, and then Mike Davey came along, and I think Peter Fane was on it as well, from memory. And I know Mike Davey did a lot of work in the second half of last year, trying to get some answers in terms of the final financial thing, which I don't think we've had. So from a personal, the only reason I would want to, I'm happy to carry it on, is to try and I feel this committee needs a final report and details of the costs and the procedures that happened into One Cam, and I don't think we've ever had that. And I know Mike did, as I say, Mike did a lot of work on that, and sadly, no disrespect to Simon, sadly he's not on the committee, but I would like to just carry that on and try and put a line under it. But I don't know if others want to join me in that. I'm not necessarily saying it should be a one-man thing, but if it is, so be it.
Members, do you have a view on that expressed role for the rapporteur on the outturn, the bottom line of One Cam, and on Councillor Sharp's offer to take that forward as a rapporteur with a single wrap-up report? Members content with that? Yep. Okay, thank you very much for the offer, Councillor Sharp, and we look forward to receiving that report in due course. Bus reform, Councillor Hay, you've been dealing with that. Were you wishing to do so again?
I'm happy to continue unless anyone else wants to take over.
Thank you. And are members content for Councillor Hay to continue to fulfil that role? Yes? Good. Thank you very much, Councillor Hay. Are there any other rapporteur roles that we feel we need to appoint to at this meeting? I'm conscious that we haven't yet discussed our work programme, and that it's rather odd to discuss rapporteur roles without an agreed work programme, or at least some suggestions to fill the spaces. But at this time, does anybody see an immediate role for one or more further rapporteurs to do pieces of work? Nobody? No, we can always, of course, fill those in meeting by meeting. They are designed to be short-term appointments for short-term pieces of work. So we can return to that once we're clearer about what our work programme is. So I believe we've completed that item. If members are satisfied, shall we then move on to item 7, which is indeed the work programme? And Anne, are you going to introduce this for us?
Thank you, Chair. So the committee has recommended to discuss and agree items for the work programme, the prioritisation, and comment on, as appropriate, what resources may be required.
Thank you very much indeed. We have a draft, if somewhat incomplete, work programme ahead of us. It might be worth at the bottom of page 24 onwards changing 2022 to 2023. It did momentarily confuse me, I have to say, and maybe others, but other than that, I'd like to start by pitching in and saying that there are a number of things that I think we will need to be looking at during the coming 6 months, probably. The first one I would like to suggest is that there is an ongoing governance review of the combined authority and its operation, and I do think it's important that we, as Overview and Scrutiny, play an appropriate role in that. What that role may be is slightly open, I think, but I certainly would want to put a place marker for us for the next 6 months to be playing a role in the review of governance. The second thing I'd like to put on the table as a suggestion is that the various issues around the functioning of the combined authority, perhaps outside of the governance review, that have been much in the public eye in recent weeks, and our role, again, whatever it may be, and in conjunction with other bodies within the combined authority, in addressing whatever of that matter is not covered by the governance review. A number of issues there, I think, for us to be looking at and making a contribution to. The third thing, we'll be receiving an update on housing shortly. I think there is a role for us to be looking in more depth at the papers that were put for the board, which I think was curtailed somewhat, about the future of the role of this body in housing. For the first 4 years, it had a significant budget for housing. It now has no new money for housing. So what is the role of the combined authority in housing, given that it's got no financial contribution to make to building new homes? And the fourth one is the local transport and connectivity plan, which is always a very significant issue, transport in its different ways across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. That's now out for public consultation, and I think we need to be penciling in some time to look at that in more depth. So those are the four things I would like to put on the table. I'd welcome members' views on those and on any other issues that they would like to raise. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to bring in the transport and connectivity plan. That's very important. I wasn't sure, and I know you led on this, Rapporteur, was the devolution deal. And the third bit I've got is, which I know we did touch on at our training session last week, is, and I'm not sure of the dates, is obviously an outturn from a financial point of view for 21-22, but also in the past we've also, I think it's had quarterly accounts, and certainly that's what we discussed last week, that part of reviewing the budget is also looking at on a regular, maybe quarterly or half yearly. I'm not sure what I think it was quarterly previously, that we have those presented for us so we can then comment on. But obviously we're going to be led by finance team as to when those would fit into the work programme.
Thank you. That sounds very sensible to me. Any other members with views? Councillor van der Weyer.
If I've read the agenda correctly, this is the only real opportunity we have to discuss the sort of governance questions. I mean, briefly, I think. Obviously, there's been the input from the auditors of the organisation, and I don't think there's an awful lot to say at this point, but except that I think there is an important role for overview and scrutiny in looking at that, alongside audit itself. If when we come to the letter did include some emphasis about the urgency of this. When we're coming to look at our sort of meeting schedule, ensuring that, I mean, often we sort of have meetings every couple of months rather than monthly. I think there might be some role to having ensuring that we're obviously we are this committee will hopefully be quickly engaged in these issues. I think we need to be publicly demonstrating that we are engaged in them, so that's one thing I'm thinking about the programming of the meetings, and then yes, we can probably at this stage, other than possibly asking you to mandating you to discuss with officers and with other colleagues of Chair of Audit, for example, how best to deal with these matters. I think that's probably all that's I want to say at the moment.
Thank you very much, and I think now is probably not the time for a long drawn-out discussion of the detail, but certainly we absolutely need to get the process right and get everybody on board and working together on this. Councillor Dew next, and then Councillor Agent.
Yeah, thank you very much. I noticed from the programme at the moment, we've only got one visit from the Mayor, and that's on a provisional date rather than an actual date. Last year we had the 4 visits. I know it's split between various formats, but I'd like to see that firmed up. I mean, it was useful to us. Ignoring the other matters that are going on, I think there's other things that we discussed and brought forward and were useful. So I'd like to see if we can find some time to get those penciled in rather than on provisional dates, i.e. actual dates, so both the Mayor, who we know is a busy man, and ourselves know when he's here. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's absolutely right. We need to pencil in the 2 mayoral question times, the one that is for us and the one that was the more public one, which took place at Eddington in the last municipal year. And also we need to be seeing the Mayor as chair of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, and he has always said that he is happy to come along, subject to his diary commitments, to talk to us in that role. And I think that will be important as the transport and connectivity plan wends through its stages as well, so that we can have some conversations about that. So I absolutely agree. Councillor Agent.
Thank you. I'd like to, for a moment, to focus on the transport, and probably the infrastructure mixes in with that. I think that we have a responsibility. There is a conversation taking place across the whole county and Peterborough on what the future transport is going to look like. There is a similar conversation taking place, or having almost taken place, in South Cambs and the city of Cambridge, sorry. And I think that what we're looking at is a drift towards some form of curtailment of the amount of private traffic and a movement towards public transport. And I think that we have a responsibility when the conversations are closing and the reports are out, to actually take not exactly a position on that, but to be assisting with whatever the decision is made by the public and hopefully the Mayor. And of course, at that other place where there's a mixture of political parties, the GCP, I think it's all involved. And I think it is very important for us to come to some understanding and leadership position for the constituents of the people that we represent, because it's not a single conversation. There is a very pro-car lobby, and yet the car is something that is damaging the planet. And so we have a responsibility, I would say, to decide whether we are going to help those people with cars to reduce the amount of cars usage. And I'd like us to have a serious conversation about that, an agendaed item, when the conversations that are taking place with the Mayor actually go public, so that we can take part positively in the debate that will follow at combined authority, if that makes sense. If anybody wants a bit more detail, I can flesh that out a bit, because I'm also on the GCB board, so I have a really distinct interest in that area.
Thank you. Any comments on that or anything else from members? Councillor Miscandlin.
Thank you, Lorna. The public question time that the Mayor is going to come forward and have the public questions, I think it needs to be advertised to the public that he is available to answer questions. If I remember last year, there weren't any. So were the public made aware of it? Is it advertised in any way? And I think that needs to be dealt with so that the public can interact with the mayor and get questions to what they perceive as fairly relevant questions to answer. I also noticed from the work programme, we've only got one venue for the next year. We had this discussion last year, and it's the Peterborough and Cambridgeshire combined authority, and it was deemed that we should go around the area and visit the towns that are within the jurisdiction of the CPCA. And I think it's important that we do that and not only have one venue for the whole year. Also, there's a clerical error in the dates on the forwards. It says March 2022, April 2023. Well, it should be 23, June 2022. I think that needs to be corrected.
Thank you very much. I'll have to check back with officers about the rotating venues. I'm not convinced that now that we are settled here, we were going to continue to rotate around the area, but I may have misremembered. My memory is not infallible by any means. Councillor van der Weyer.
Well, just on that point, obviously in the past we have debated this question a lot. Now the combined authority is based here. We have to balance our travel with the travel of officers, and I think I'd certainly be more keen to travel further rather than ask officers to. I value my time less.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you. I'm very happy for it to carry on meeting here. If I can introduce a very a somewhat personal note, we've scheduled the climate change stuff to come back at our September meeting. I wonder if the committee would consider deferring that to November, because I'm expecting to go on paternity leave on almost exactly that day. So there are various risks. I may already be on leave, or in fact I may need to leave very suddenly halfway through the meeting. So I wonder if perhaps, I mean, in addition, I think with all the activity that's happening at the moment, it's unlikely that significant work is going to happen between now and September on this issue. I know, for instance, there were a number of environmental schemes that were due to be considered by the board at its previous meeting, which have now been deferred to a date unknown. So, those some of those projects, which I think we discussed at our last meeting, still don't have the kind of financial authority to proceed. So I think perhaps deferring that to November, although it is one of the few items that we have in at the moment, if we could push that to November, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we going to be kind to Councillor Atkins and allow him to take his paternity leave? Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure that will be fine, yes. Any other observations on the work programme? Do we want to start then penciling some additional items in? I think we are in June now. We have a meeting in July, a reserve date in August. Is there a general view that we would prefer not to populate that August reserve date if we possibly can, or is there a huge appetite to meet in August? I mean, if there isn't, and if we can get away with not using that date, then I think we need an early update in July on certainly the most urgent things. I think we ought to put in at every meeting for the next 6 months the governance review and the current ongoing issues, because there are urgencies there, and we need to be assured that we've got capacity at every meeting to be on top of those. So the other thing I was going to suggest was I think we need to find a date that is most suitable for the local transport and connectivity plan, because that's something else that is time critical, and I'm wondering whether we've got thoughts about when that would best fit. Councillor Sharp.
Yes, I agree. We need to bring. I'm not sure of the closing date on for consultation on that off the top of my head.
I think we're
okay
for that consultation to complete.
Thank you, Dave. So we can either bring it in July or if we're looking to populate August.
I would have thought that it would be after the.
Right, can we leave that to Councillor Bagent to come back to us, and we may need to add a July item if, do people feel that it would be useful to have a discussion on the local transport and connectivity plan while the consultation is still running, if indeed the 25th of July is within scope of that? I'm not sure that it is. Is it an 8-week or a 12-week consultation? It concludes on August the 4th, thank you, Anne. So 25th of July would be in the consultation period. Do we think we want to meet in the consultation period, or do we want to have a discussion about it in September? Councillor Bagent.
Thank you. I would think that we were best off after the report comes out, and perhaps an early meeting prior to the report with the Mayor. That might be the best way. So when the data's available but not yet public, that we get some confidential, if you like, insight as to what's coming out, and then we can have some perhaps input on the report that the Mayor is going to make. And I think that's what our role is. That's where we come from. And so if the report, if the data's collected by the end of August and assembled by early September, there might be an opportunity to do that in September. I don't see any, well, of course, there's always points in meeting, but I don't see any great purpose served by meeting before the data comes out. It's the data that we want to see.
Right, so if we could schedule that in for September, but if we can go away and work out whether there is a need for a more informal meeting beforehand, we might, if it's an informal briefing, we might not even need to have it in a physical place, and that might be something we could do over the summer once we've got more data on that. Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, I would agree with what Councillor Bagent's just said, and what the Chair's just said. Because we've always spoken or been speaking a lot about trying to get involved in projects and reports before they're issued. So this is a prime opportunity to actually, you know, if we've got any burning things we're not happy with, or whatever, or what things we want to influence that report with, then I think this is an ideal opportunity to see how we can be our overview part of it rather than the scrutiny. So I would agree with that. Obviously, what we don't want is for them to be so far down the line when we get a chance to talk about it that they've, you know, it's set in stone. But I would agree with your comments.
One would hope that the officers could actually arrange that for us. I mean, it's impossible for us to do it, but there could be some discussions between important people and other.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hassel, and I'm just going to say before I bring you in to speak that I should have introduced the new members to this committee, and I apologise for not having done so earlier. Councillor Hassel, you're one of our new members. Councillor Harvey, also a new member, and Councillor Smith today is standing in for a new member, Councillor Robertson. So welcome very much to this meeting and to future meetings during the year. Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if we could take a rule of thumb to do more overview than scrutiny at this stage, I think that would be a really good thing. Yeah, passing that back to the officers so that we can actually influence. Seems that we can add a lot more value by doing that.
Thank you. Point well made. Anybody else on this? Are we confident that we've done what we need to do and can do with the work programme at the moment? Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. With that, oh, Jodie, I beg your pardon. Out of line of vision.
Apologies. And this is obviously meant in the spirit of interest. Obviously, it's for members to determine their work programme. However, during the induction for members on scrutiny, we raised some of the key provisional findings that have come out of the review of governance, where we were asked, of course, to try and have a bit more of a focus on scrutiny, so we could get back to you in time. And we were also able to reflect back on you on some of the ongoing work the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny are doing in regards to developing a new future guide on combined authority scrutiny, which I understand is now due out early next year. And we did make some suggestions that you may want to take on board in your work programming, that were about how the role you could play in strengthening our governance at the combined authority by strengthening the scrutiny function. And some of those suggestions, just go back to those, were about having some, or identifying the potential role scrutiny can play in the strategic context of the combined authority. So how you can play an active role in the development of big plans, policies, and the way the combined authority prioritises its work. My understanding is that is going to be one of the fundamental components of the future combined authority guidance from CFGS in regards to how they view the role of a scrutiny function at a combined authority level. Also how to deliver combined authority accountability for the region, which is issues you have obviously discussed already, how to provide proportionate and constructive challenge to the Mayor and also the wider combined authority on their activities and performance. And that is an area that all CA scrutiny functions are currently trying to get their head around in regards to what is the most effective way to do that. You've already identified mayoral question time, which definitely seems to be a good way forward, and you might want to look to have some conversations about how you develop that function further to get further public engagement. And also what do you need to do to identify the key themes from a scrutiny perspective in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough combined authority context, because they will be different in every combined authority. And if I can just give you an example, so the West Midlands, for example, have clearly identified one of their key scrutiny themes is how do we ensure our transport decision making is integrated and takes into account wider elements such as health, housing, etc. And that is a key theme in their scrutiny function that they look to deliver in all the work they undertake. You may want to look into developing your own scrutiny key themes and then having a bit of a function, a focus on those moving forward. So just some advice, things we know are on the frontier and were raised in the induction session.
Thank you very much indeed, Jodie. You're a fount of knowledge on all of this, and that's useful guidance. Just to pick up something very quickly on the Mayor's question time. You mentioned, Councillor Miscanlon, that you thought there would be no questions from the public. The public mayoral question time, there were more questions from the public than there were questions from us at the one that we ran. So I think as a first run, I was very pleased with how that turned out. I think we very much need to get the word out and encourage members of the public to take advantage of that opportunity to hold the Mayor to account personally and directly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Are we done on that item then? If so, the next item, item 8, is to consider the co-option of an independent member and substitute from a constituent council. This is an annual request from the board that we consider this item, and I'll ask Anne to introduce it in the absence of Robert Parkin, whose report this is.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the report is to ask the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to consider the appointment of an independent member from a constituent council for this municipal year. At the Combined Authority Board last Wednesday, the board requested that the committee consider the appointment of a co-opted member. The guidance from Centre for Governance and Scrutiny does say that when appointed, co-optees should be treated as full members, but to consider that they do add value to the membership. Happy to take any questions.
Do members have any questions on this? Councillor Hay.
Yeah, my understanding is that any co-opted member won't have voting rights. So I just want to know, what are they going to bring new to this committee if they can't vote?
Just to confirm that they would not have voting rights.
And I think that's always been a sticking point for me, is that it seems wrong to patch up the requirement of legislation, government legislation, that discounts independent councillors from the proportionality calculations. That's not something that's within our gift. And I think we are seeing a rise in the number of independent councillors across several of the districts and member bodies now. And it does seem, and I'll speak personally, it seems to me particularly unfair that they are not included in the calculations. And I'm not convinced that co-opting someone who cannot vote, and to be fair, we don't vote on things as this committee particularly often. We tend to operate by consensus, which I think is the right way to do it if we can. It seems to me it is not our role to patch up that particular piece of legislation, and I would prefer to see government actually accord independent members full rights to be calculated for the purposes of determining membership of this body. That's my personal view. Anybody else wishing to speak on this item or make a proposal one way or the other? Does anybody wish to propose either that we do or that we don't co-opt an independent member? Flurry of hands. Councillor Coles, Councillor Hay, and sorry, who was the third hand? Was it you, Councillor Hassel? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I propose that we take a vote on this about whether we go ahead or not. It seems to be, from what I've been seeing, is that for different reasons people are against the idea.
Thank you. Councillor Hay?
I would propose that we vote against having a co-opted member for the reasons I gave earlier, which is I can't see the point if they don't have voting rights.
Okay, thank you. Before I move to Councillor Hassel, is that seconded? It's seconded by Councillor Miscandlin. Councillor Hassel.
I was just going to ask the question whether there was any expertise that we felt that we needed on this committee. So, for example, if we had someone that we could co-opt in who was an expert on transport, for example, would that be a reason for co-opting someone?
Councillor Dew.
You know, I can see that's a sensible question to ask, but I mean, we have the right to ask anyone to come and speak to us about any topic, which is probably more accurate. Part of the problem I have is not knowing the members outside my constituent group as to whose expertise, if we were to have them as a member, we would choose. I mean, there's people I know and like, but that's not a good reason for having them here. So I think, you know, agreeing with you, Chairman, I think we're stuck with an imperfect system that needs fixing from outside, really.
Okay, thank you. I've got a proposal then, duly proposed and seconded on the table, that we do not co-opt an independent person, an independent member onto this body. Can I see those in favour of not adopting, co-opting an independent person? I think that is unanimous. So thank you very much indeed, members. That item is now concluded. And we now have a one-cam closure verbal update, and I believe that in Robert Fox's absence, that's going to be Jodie. Am I right? You look as if this is a surprise to you. I hope it isn't.
No problem. So yes, it was originally going to be our colleague Robert Fox, who's unfortunately unable to attend today, but he has sent through some details for me to read to the committee. All the necessary paperwork to close the OneCam Limited Company has been completed internally at the Combined Authority in terms of the company accounts at closure and statement of compliance. Final closure is now in the hands of the company legal advisors and the formalities are taking place. It is anticipated the final strike-off from Companies House will occur before the end of July. And that is the update provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that update, Jodie. Councillor Sharp, how does that interact with your request to bring a report to this body on the closure of OneCam?
I'd be interested. Obviously, yes, that sounds like the strike off of the company, but I thought we were going to have details of what the actual financial numbers involved in that were. That's what we were really looking for. Maybe I'll take that out. If members are happy, I'll take that outside the meeting. And I just think we need, from a personal point of view, I don't know how the members feel. I feel because it was such a large, a huge infrastructure project that obviously didn't get completed for, we know the reasons. but there was lots of costs involved, and I think we should be flagging up to the public though what those costs were, and obviously asking the relevant questions, which I don't think we've ever had the opportunity to ask. So I'll happily take that outside of you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. In the meantime, are there any questions for Jody on the statement that he's just made? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks all. So that's one CAM item 9 dealt with. Our penultimate item on the agenda is item 10, which is a housing update. And we have Roger Thompson, Director of Housing, with us, who's been waiting very patiently for this moment, and he's going to speak to the board report, Future Combined Housing Authority, Housing Purpose and Function, to which I alluded in our discussion of the work programme. You have a link in your papers to that report, and it's, I think, half a dozen appendices, but over to Roger.
Thank you very much, Chair, and actually, I have to say, excuse me, nice to be here in person in sort of slightly post-COVID times. So I'm going to do hopefully a relatively brief introduction to the paper, and I'm very happy to take questions or take part in any sort of debate that you want to have following that. So the paper that you've had access to with the appendices is a paper on the CA Housing Purpose and Function from this point onwards, and it's proposed to come forward to the next board meeting. It was due to come to the meeting last week, but that obviously was deferred. In the preparation of the paper, we had workshops with both local constituent council officers and delivery partners. That was very well attended. There was over 40 people on that workshop. A workshop with the CA leaders. We then had subsequent input into the draft paper from a group of officers from the local constituent councils, and a discussion with leaders at a leaders strategy session. So it's very much been put together in a sort of collaborative basis. It's not something that we've just pulled out of the air. The affordable housing programme under the DEVO deal came to an end with 1,449 additional affordable housing units having started on site by 31st March 2022. The work around that programme, I think, is in Appendix 3 in your package of documents. The work associated with the programme, however, has not come to an end, because what we have achieved is the starting of units on site. The CPCA needs to continue to monitor the building out of those units, alongside managing the payment of grant monies and indeed the return of loan monies from the 4 loans that are still outstanding, which are to be recycled into the grant monies. That's referred in section 3.1 in the proposed housing activities. The question then is, what does the housing purpose and function reasonably aspire to be beyond that, bearing in mind that at present there is no capital revenue support outside of the CPCA's existing resources. The suggested recommendation is to maintain sufficient housing officer skills and capability to enable a response to future housing policy initiatives and opportunities, recognising that the CPCA has collaborative and convening power with the constituent council housing teams and, of course, with Homes England. This is articulated under sections 3.2 and 3.6 in the paper. In addition, there's a recommendation to continue to support community-led housing throughout the CPCA area, in line with the policy approved by Housing Committee at its meeting in January 2022. That's also an appendix to the papers. There appears to be no future need or justification to retain the 2 wholly owned companies whose original purpose was to engage in direct development or joint ventures. So there's a recommendation that these should be wound up. Finally, as part of the Even Better Transformation Programme, whoever the Chief Executive is, in terms of the new appointment for an interim Chief Executive, they are being asked to organise the resources and skills to support this suggested purpose, and to enhance the links to infrastructure, skills and growth capabilities through the transformation programme. And I think that's where I'd stop, Chair, and invite questions and debate.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Roger. First question, Councillor van der Weyer, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, yes, I'm the lead member for this committee on housing, and I was last year, and we'll continue at it. You very kindly briefed me on this on the process in advance, which is very good of you, and it's good to see that there was some good engagement and good discussions had there, and to see the output of that. I take it from this output that there is clearly some potential value that the combined authority could add in the housing field, on especially on sort of strategic things that are a bit beyond the scale of a district council, especially on infrastructure, housing infrastructure bids, for example, construction methods. That's something that has been explored that could be pursued, and then, as you said, on skills as well, and then with Homes England. So there's clearly the potential there. Obviously, it's important that we don't sort of retain some capacity that isn't actually being used for any length of time. So the next stage we do have to. I think the one important question is making sure that capacity that is retained is exploited, but while also being ready to take opportunities as they come up. But I think you have set out that out clearly. And yes, unfortunately, this wasn't discussed at the board last week, because it's something that I sort of, reading between the lines, as it were, is that there is a need as well for political leadership on this, political endorsement of the strategy that is chosen, and that's something that the sort of the board has to look at as and when it comes up to the board. So thank you for the work. Thank you for coming to present to us.
Maybe I could just help with giving some idea, I think, of the sort of things that I'm suggesting that the retained capability, and I think there does need to be some retained capability. If we're being transparent about this, I think under the transformation programme, it doesn't need to be a directorate. It needs to be part of a different directorate, maybe a directorate of place, for example, where you get this integration with our transportation and our business communities, which we've had. But to be frank, I think it could be enhanced maybe if it was under one stable directorate there. But there are things that happen out there. There is, we don't know, but there may be another round of HIF funding, for example. It comes down to central government. Be brilliant if the combined authority had the capability to respond as it did for the Cambridge North East Fringe project, which was very successful in achieving a lot of funding through HIF. There's a relationship with Homes England, which, although they're saying there's no prescribed and allocated money for us, nevertheless, they hold the keys to a large pot of money, and therefore there's a relationship there to be maintained. DLUC occasionally throw out maybe some request with some short-term funding available for, it's happened before, for what you might describe as oven-ready projects. So someone in the organisation who knows what and where the oven-ready projects are, so that we can respond as an organisation when DLUC do throw quite often a short notice sort of request, because they've come up with some money, some capability for that, I think. There's a situation with the major employers in our area where they have pressure around housing for their staff specifically, and some of them are now considering, and maybe some of their own interventions. Is there some sort of strategic support that the combined authority might be able to give around some of that? There's the question of the Oxcam Arc and what happens next. Housing was obviously a key part of that. So again, maintaining some sort of knowledge and capability to be able to respond in those sorts of areas is important. So I think the problem is you can't nail any of that with certainty to a wall and say, all right, this is definitely going to happen, that's definitely going to happen. I think one person did sort of challenge quite rightly and say, actually, do we need a housing entity at all? My view is that the organisation does. It just needs probably a couple of very skilled officer level individuals within the organisation to maintain that capability. So just to give you some context, maybe, for stuff.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Keep going.
Do I need to turn mine off to enable you to go?
Yes.
Well, there you go. Now we know. Now we know the answer. Thank you very much for your update and for sight of the report. My interest is in skills, and clearly there's recognition of the lack of skills in this area. Now, are we here talking about skills within the combined authority to deliver housing, or are we talking about the much wider question about the number of people who have the skills to build? Because obviously my interest is very much on that latter element. And are you making a bid to take that particular area over, to make a small growth in an empire rather than allow the skills team to get on with it?
No, I've got no intention of interfering with the skills team. The skills team, I think, are aware that there's pressures in the construction industry generally, and obviously we've got modern methods of construction that we want to see more of happening. It seems to be sort of quite a slow evolution into modern methods of construction. Part of that is for cost and skills reasons, actually, I think. Both in a way, in what you say, in the housing sort of knowledge, if you like, within a combined authority. I think I've got, for example, 2 very good officers at the moment. My view would be actually that they might be entirely appropriate to maintain that level of expertise within the organisation. But on the other side of the coin, if there is a transformation that takes place, then aligning those housing skills closer to transportation and infrastructure particularly, but then business and skills is going to be, I think, key to my mind to how the organisation can evolve. Because it's, in my time, it's grown up from being very sort of immature, sort of new organisation. I've been here 4 years, to something that's actually sort of maturing out. It's now into its second mayor. It's evolving, and it just needs to continue to evolve. And I have a very positive outlook for what that could look like with the transformation plan that's been discussed. So.
Thank you. Councillor Miscanlon.
Thank you very much, Laura. Equally with Councillor Coles, I'm interested in skills. And we all hear the developers shouting, we've got no brickies, we've got no carpenters, we've got no ground workers. I'm very interested in modular construction. We have at this moment in time a company coming into Whittlesea that is modular construction, Mace. They're coming from an area where they can't expand, so they're coming to build a industrial site at Kingsdyke. Should the authority be promoting modular construction, because you don't require brickies, you have a minimum amount of work, and a house can go from ground level to roof in 8 weeks, to occupation in 8 weeks. So I think it's something that the authority could look at positively and get houses built quickly. I know there's a problem with the mortgage companies. They don't like giving mortgages on modular constructed houses, but I think that is slightly changing because of the need for houses to be built quickly and constructed in a manner that's suitable for the people. We all remember, well, maybe not everyone here, I remember prefabs in London. They're now listed buildings. They're still around, and they were around from the 40s when I was young. So they do last, and they do have a great occupation for the public. Thank you.
I think my only comment on that would be to generally agree with you. Clearly there's a skills issue in the construction industry. Everyone is referring to that. There are various reasons for that, which we won't go into here. But looking ahead, yes, trying to encourage MMC is an aspiration. There are seemingly, from time to time, lots of different hurdles that are thrown up to it. But I think over time it will evolve. And the question for the combined authority, obviously we're not getting involved with local councils with their planning policies, which is a bit of a minefield if we try and go there. But nevertheless, maybe as a combined authority, we might wanting to be encourage policies that sort of evolve in that direction in the future. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. In the report, there isn't much discussion of how sites were selected and how you had kind of reference to the geography of the area. Perhaps you could expand a little bit about how this original allocation has been. I mean, I know there's a long list of where everything is, but in terms of strategically, how those decisions were made. And my second question is around the cap on the grant rate that was imposed in the most recent period. and you say that that effectively restricted the area in which the program could function. Does that mean that, in some sense, the program couldn't operate in the areas where there was, in fact, perhaps the greatest need for affordable housing?
Thank you for that. Actually, pretty much throughout our whole area, there is some form of need for affordable housing. We have a very diverse economy. We have a very diverse housing market. It's radically different from Greater Cambridge to Royston to Peterborough to the most northern end of the fens. So there's a challenge there in trying to have one policy that fits all. However, we were, in the last 12 months, severely restricted, I think, by some of the, let's call it, conditions, I think that's probably the right word, that DLUHC applied to us to enable us to continue to function with the programme between March 21 and March 22. And what I'm acknowledging is that the more expensive areas of the combined authority, it was very difficult, verging on impossible, to find schemes at that rate of 45,000 or less in those areas, which is why when you look at that schedule of the schemes in the past 12 months, they are largely in the sort of centre and the north of the area, because that's the area where we, in terms of our ability to intervene at that sort of level of available finance per unit, we were able to function. I think the team that I've got actually did a remarkable job in doing that, allowing for the fact that we really only had 6 months from DLUHC approving that 12-month programme to actually get units started on site, which was a challenge in itself. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Sis. I'd like to ask a question about the sixth of the 8 principles relating to community land trusts, which states that it opens by stating there will be an ongoing focus on community land trusts. Now, these have been a particularly East Cambridgeshire preoccupation, and I think that has been evident in where that activity has been happening, and also I think that the focus on community land trusts during the previous mayoralty also came from the fact that the previous mayor was from East Cambridgeshire. However, looking at Appendix 6 to the papers for the board, which will now be taken at a later date, the responses from the other authorities, the other member authorities to CLTs, have been, I think, best described as lukewarm. And given that lukewarm, well, there may be some merit in these somewhere, but this really shouldn't be the sole focus of our attention, and there are lots of other tools in the toolbox, and all of those kind of responses. There wasn't an overwhelming enthusiasm for CLTs as a focus, other than in East Cambs, where much of this has come from, and where also it has to be said that the member district has actually taken my member district has taken its ball home in terms of not participating in the arrangements that there are within the combined authority for support for CLTs, and it's doing its own thing. I'd also, I think, be obliged to point out that these CLTs in East Cambridgeshire have been very variable. Some of them have been doing very, very good work, and I'm thinking particularly of Swaffham Prior and the focus that there was there on reducing oil dependency, and that's been a superb piece of work. There have been other CLTs that have had a genuine community focus and have done good things. There have been others which have been controversial, would be to put it kindly, and have been the focus of massive community tension. There is also an East Cambs Community Land Trust, which if one says, right, okay, this is a CLT that is for the whole of the district, sitting on top of, alongside the ones that are actually locally based, how community-led is that if it's a whole district CLT established by the district council with the leader of the council as a key trustee of that? So it seems to me that if there is so little enthusiasm from member bodies of this combined authority outside the one place where it is going ahead and where they are doing their own thing, thanks but no thanks combined authority. Why is that still a principle? And is that something that perhaps the board ought to be reconsidering?
Thank you for that, Chair. I think if I just go back in terms of the principle of the CLTs, there was obviously a discussion and debate at Housing Committee, and Housing Committee have approved the paper that you see in front of you. If I recall correctly, most of that debate was supportive of CLTs, and obviously there's only one chair from East Cambridgeshire there. It's a combined committee as such. So the committee did express support for the principle of CLTs. We do have CLTs outside of East Cambridgeshire. I think that I can't remember the exact number, it's 12 or 13 or so, I think, sort of that are ongoing at the moment. And actually we're trying to encourage that. But I think it's important maybe we come back to some of the delivery resourcing and behind it, because what's happening is that East Cambridgeshire District Council have their own dedicated CLT team. We are not directly engaging with them in terms of their delivery processes. They are running their own team. We have appointed for the rest of the combined authority area an outside supplier called Eastern Community Homes, and they are supplying that, if you like, CLT expertise to support and nurture the smaller, and they are largely at the moment smaller CLTs that, in terms of their organisations that are starting to appear outside of East Cambridgeshire District Council. Now, while the Housing Committee and the board are inclined to sort of want to support the nurturing of CLTs outside of East Cambridgeshire, I think that's, we're resourcing that. We have small grants that we can offer to them for starting up. At the moment, the policy we have with committee and if board approve is to continue to sort of do that. But I note what you're saying about some of the specific in East Cambridgeshire, but what I'd say is that in terms of their delivery, they have asked to do their own thing, and the combined authority is sort of letting them do their own thing with CLTs in East Cambs at the moment.
Yeah, I think, yes, that's not the combined authority's concern now if they are doing their own thing. My concern was about the statement that there will be an ongoing focus on community land trust when it doesn't seem to be top of anybody else's agenda.
Well, we get, Eastern Community Homes and are talking to sort of other groups who have come across this. They've seen the idea, they want to find out more about it, they want to explore it and determine whether or not it might be something that they might want to engage. Do we want to discourage that process just because it's not in East Cambridgeshire? I think Housing Committee decided that they wanted to encourage that process still, and hence we have the policy that Housing Committee approved. I'm sure some point this will probably get reviewed again, and there'll be another assessment down the line. And does the combined authority still want to continue with the policy that committee is currently running with?
Yeah, and I mean, just to come back one last time on that, I think if it said something like that the combined authority will welcome expressions of interest from the community in CLTs, that might be different from saying it is our job as a body to focus on that. And that's where I think it may be worth having another look, because you're right, if there's a genuine community interest locally in doing something along those lines, one wouldn't want to discourage it, of course one wouldn't, but that's different from the combined authority focusing on it.
I appreciate the subtlety in the wording. All I'd say is that's what Housing Committee have as a policy are saying they were comfortable with. So
though at an individual level the authorities are less keen anyway. I did say that was one last time. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'll try this. It's a little bit. What's good and what's laughing? Oh, thank you. I thought your remarks were spot on, because that's reflected my understanding from reading through all of the appendices and particularly the consultation responses. So, what we do as an institution, we focus on the core functions for which we're established, or do we engage in mission creep? So, if it's mission creep that we're talking about, and I have a strong inkling it is, then has a sound business case been made for what I'd call just in case redundancy? So we have spare carrying capacity just in case an opportunity might come along. Or do we call it duplication of effort because all of the district councils and the unitary are local housing authorities in their own right? So I think they're the questions that we're being asked to comment on. And my view is that an insufficiently strong business case has been made to justify this. And I think particularly your point about the very lukewarm response from the local housing authorities about community housing, and as you said, it's only one tool in the toolbox, is a substantial part of the proposition, which I think you've just taken apart, frankly. So what are we left with? Well, we're left with a discussion around skills and so on, but that's a function of the combined authority, which can be dealt with within that. And then we just have funding bids, but those capacities within the local housing authorities. Cambridge City Council does a cracking job and combines with other local authorities in the county, in the sub-region on that. And I'm thinking of the retrofit applications, for instance. So I'm not convinced, Chair.
Thank you very much. Roger, did you want to comment on what I think was an observation rather than a question?
To be honest, Chair, no. Noted the observation.
Fair enough, indeed. Are there any other observations on this? I mean, I think we've strayed from some fairly generally sort of supportive procedural issues to a couple of observations which have been quite probing about this. Do members feel that we just want to say, well, okay, let's do, the board will do its thing, let them go away and discuss it? Or is there something that we want to say to the board when, at whatever date, which I think is yet to be determined, the board considers these papers? Is there an observation or a set of observations that we might wish to make on the content of what is being proposed? I'm looking to Councillor van der Weyer as our housing member, but also obviously any other member of this committee.
Well, I think Councillor Smith said it a little bit more directly than I was saying, but making sure that the board has sought through it with some care what the sort of a baseline function is going to look like that then would allow those opportunities if that's the way they want to do it. I mean, I think, asking that, ensuring that the board takes that fully into account when they discuss it, whether that's in the form of a question or a comment from us. I think that's emphasising that point.
What do other members feel? We tend to operate sort of by general agreement or consensus or on this. Is there, do members agree that there is something we ought to be saying about this, and if so, what is it? Saying to the board, I mean. Councillor Coles.
If I may, I think if there isn't the money, then is it right that we should be seeing the combined authority trying to deliver something on housing? And that's the key for me. If there isn't the opportunity to develop the finance, then what's the point, largely?
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I understand what Councillor Smith was saying just now. If the money's not there, and as I understand it reading the papers, a lot of the money is the money that's coming back from the loans that some of the loans that East Cambridgeshire have got to build the Community Land Trust, which obviously is building houses. And presumably in here would have been, is it the Green Homes project and money from that as well? Would have.
That's not in here.
That's not in here. Okay, fine.
That's it.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Roger. So it's a difficult one, because I think one of the things, as I remember going back 5 years, the Combined Authority, one of its aims, or part of the, was to build affordable housing across the county. And obviously, I know Cambridge had the separate 70 million, because we're purely talking about the 100 million here. It's slightly sad that when because of the funds are not there, we're not able to deliver more in the region. It's more an observation than a.
Any other input into this? I mean, I'm not sure that we're at the stage of wanting necessarily to ask a question of the board, but I do wonder whether it is worth putting in writing some of the things that have been said in this session for the board prior to their having the discussion on this. Is that, do we have any idea when the board is going to meet? Are we in the dark?
We're obviously currently checking availability of board membership. We did have a reserve date of the 29th, which is no longer possible due to availability of members, but we are attempting to get a meeting hopefully in the day or two before the 29th, but that is an attempt at the moment.
Thank you. If we have draft minutes by this stage, would it be appropriate to forward those draft minutes to members of the board and say this is the discussion that we have had, without necessarily coming to a single view in this meeting about what we should say, simply to say we have had this discussion, we have raised these issues, and we would very much like the board to consider what we have said as it has this discussion. I'm sure we will come back to the housing principles and the housing role later on in the year, but for the moment my feeling is that I would quite like us to have put forward what we have said today, in its fullness in the draft minutes to the board before the board meets. If that can be done, is that something that this committee would be happy to see done? Councillor Miscanlon.
I totally agree. I think it brings forward, there's been quite a good discussion and there's been some very poignant answers. I think it's a point that the Housing Committee needs to know about and will give them food for thought in going forward.
Okay, any other views on that? I'm not seeing any dissent as a way forward on that. Are we agreed that, subject to the timing working out for the draft minutes, so yes, that is what we will do. Yes? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. And I think we are concluded now on this. So thank you very much indeed, Roger, for coming today and for making your very interesting presentation and for fielding some interesting questions and observations. So that's item 10 done. The date of our next meeting is Monday the 25th of July at 11 a.m. and in this venue. So I look forward to seeing members in this place and at that time. Thank you very much indeed. I declare the meeting closed.